Hi, everyone. I am here with Katie Appold, the Executive Director for Do More Good and Nonprofit Hub. Katie, thanks for taking some time with us here at the Big League Philanthropist.
I am so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. I'm so excited to learn more about the work that you're doing with Do More Good and the Nonprofit Hub. So, for any of our audience members that aren't aware, tell us a little bit about the work you do, kind of from a high level.
Sure. So, Do More Good and Nonprofit Hub work combined to offer professional development resources to nonprofit pros. And 90% of everything we do is totally free.
Mm,
So, at nonprofithub.org, you'll see we have a podcast, we do weekly webinars with experts, we have a bazillion blogs, courses, you name it. And our goal is really to take nonprofit professionals who are already doing good and move them from good to growth.
I love that. And I think one of the biggest things I see in the nonprofit space is there's such a desire for resources and education and opportunities. So it's great to see someone's filling that need and really trying to get people the resources they need for free too. That's incredible.
It's
Uh,
always so impressive that the nonprofit sector, I think, invests more time and energy into professional development than, even in doctors. We are
wow.
just all about betterment, which is amazing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think the nonprofit sector is a fascinating place to work. You learn so much. You really do. And it is very similar. I think there's a lot of misnomers that nonprofit is a different, it's different obviously in the industry, but it's still business. You're still learning how to run a business and be in a corporate setting. So there's a lot of similarities. I think people always like, oh, it's nonprofit. It's all sunshine and butterflies and rainbows. It's all fun, but there's bottom lines and there's structure and plans and strategic planning, all of those things you have to do, right?
Well, and when you're in the nonprofit sector, the transparency, everything you're doing, and we always joke if it's not being audited, it's at least being analyzed.
Yeah.
You are truly a public owned and public facing organization. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
scrutiny that can come with that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one thing we see in some of the work we do is we want to make sure people know what they're getting themselves into. And so the resources it sounds like you're providing can help folks kind of handle some of those financial, legal, like you said, tax things that you just don't know about till you dive in and you're like, oh boy.
Absolutely. We have an audience in North America of around 50,000 nonprofits, and I would say easily 10,000 of those are at the entrepreneurial level. So they either have started a nonprofit and they're working through that or they wish to.
Mm.
So yeah, we always want to make sure they go in informed.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you became executive director, if I'm correct, during COVID, during the COVID time frame. So what was that like, kind of taking on this new role, working with this new organization, with this new mission, especially during such a critical time for so many nonprofits, right? So many nonprofits were saying, how are we going to continue our consistent fundraising? How are we going to grow? How are we going to get traction? So one, tell me about what it was like for you, but just like how it was coming, with your organization. What were you guys trying to do for these organizations and these entrepreneurial folks trying to start?
Sure, sure. I've been with Do More Good since the beginning. So it's been since 2019. So I had a solid year before COVID hit, but it hit us hard. We
Yeah.
used to work in an office and, we went remote. And right around the time that COVID started, we merged with Nonprofit Hub, which grew our team, grew our audience, brought a lot of change. Thankfully, most of what we were doing was digital.
Mm,
So we were able to, I wouldn't say, we didn't increase programming, but we made our audience more aware of it. Because everybody who used to go to the in person conferences, the people that, used to go to their community held workshops, were now coming to us for their professional development. So we were thankful to be able to keep going and keep pace.
yeah. No, I think that's really great that you guys were already in the digital space because so many people are trying to get there and trying to bring things there. So it probably was a really, breath of fresh air that you're like, well, we're here. Now we can take on more folks and bring them into the circle. I
It's
think that.
It's
Um,
funny though. I think back to like 2018 and I didn't know what Zoom was.
don't you wish?
So
Sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I was like early in on the Zoom thing and like had bought some shares or something back in
you and me
2018.
both. You and me both.
Too funny. It's like now a house, now it's a verb. I'm gonna go Zoom with them.
Yeah.
It's a totally, what Zoom is now. And it's, my grandmother has been on Zoom, right? So it's all these things. Zoom has kind of been the big connector. Um, and you mentioned before you had joined Do More Good at the beginning in 2019. So I want to kind of talk about your experience in your career before that. So I
Sure.
know you went to school for business and then later pursued your master's in kind of nonprofit administration. So tell me a little bit about what inspired you to be interested in the nonprofit sector. I know you worked in marketing and then you transitioned
Mhm.
in there. So tell me why nonprofit sector was something that kind of stayed as an interest for you throughout your career.
So my first kind of big job, like real job, as an adult was the marketing director for a business consulting firm. And
Okay.
in that role, I got to work with some nonprofits. And we all lean into what we love the most. And I found that I was leaning into those clients much more than I was leaning into like shoe sales or other types of business. So I ended up taking a year off to have my first child, and I decided, I want to make this shift. I want to get into cause work, but I had no background, and it can actually be kind of hard to break into the nonprofit sector. So while I was on maternity leave, I started my graduate degree in nonprofit leadership, thinking at least when I go back to work, I'll have some credentials. And I was able to stay in marketing and work for a global nonprofit publisher called Our Daily Bread.
Hmm.
And I did that for several years. I went on to lead a local human service organization. I should probably say regional human service organization, then a local schools foundation. And I was actually recruited to start Do More Good by my co founder, Bill McKendry. For anybody who thinks that you don't get jobs off of LinkedIn, I'm a testament to that being false. He actually reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, I like your background. We should talk. And a coffee meeting later, we were forming Do More Good.
Wow, that's incredible. And a big plug for LinkedIn because I know a lot of people are, do I have to keep my LinkedIn updated? I get so many
Yes, yes, you do.
messages. Yes, exactly. Katie's here to show that you absolutely need your LinkedIn to be updated. That's fantastic. And so you worked in business consulting, I guess the best way to put it. And now you've been in the nonprofit sector for several years, many years now. Tell me, is there a difference between the two? Is there really a huge difference in the work you were doing then and the work you're doing now?
Absolutely. I mean, I know we hear all the time that the difference is a tax status, but there are fundamental differences between how businesses conduct business and how nonprofits go about it. And I mean, the major ones are when a business provides a service or a product, the recipient who is paying for it is getting a good, they're
Hmm.
receiving a benefit. Now, with philanthropy and with nonprofit work, there's no goods exchanged, at least there shouldn't be. And there's no service provided. So
Mm.
we have to create with that donor the feeling of good. We have to demonstrate impact and help them to share in the goodness they're helping us to deliver. So that's very different. I do think nonprofits have a lot to learn from the for profit side of things in terms of efficiency, in terms of paying for contracted services and getting away from like a scarcity frugality mindset. But there are radical differences in how we go about things.
Yeah, I think that's really key to understand because again, we talked about how many people don't realize that nonprofits are just a specific kind of business, but like you said, they really require a lot of unique tax legal setups, like you just mentioned, the exchange of goods or services. So I would love to hear from your perspective. You're putting all of these events and workshops and resources and blogs out there. What is that big roadblock you see most people that are in this new space with a nonprofit facing as they're trying to get something started?
It's always a matter of funding,
Mm,
whether it's that initial, investment to get going, or it's keeping up, keeping the machine running, keeping, funding coming in, which, I think is, it's too bad, but it also is a testament to how driven nonprofits are. They don't just, oh, we hit $1 million budget, we're gonna hold solid. They're always driven to grow, which I think is a beautiful thing.
hmm. Yeah, I think funding is a huge challenge for any new business, but especially in the nonprofit space, like you said, where there is no exchange of goods and services, you're really trying to get someone to give you something in order to do a specific thing for a cause, right, or for a person. So it's really, I think, a great point to say, I think funding is key for everything. But my question, I guess, is have you ever discouraged someone in their idea of we want to start a nonprofit and you say, I don't know if this is the right fit. Maybe there's an organization out there that your talents and services could be more, adapted to fit what they're doing already. I just think there's so many nonprofits out there and you probably work with so many people. How do you balance, getting them excited about this? Because of course we want them to put their brilliance into the world and help everyone with, oh, well, we have 20 people that are doing something very similar. Can they collaborate in some way,
So this is one of the challenges of my career and just being me. I have those conversations all the time in the
Mm,
kindest way, but I often discourage people. I think there's a personality trait that goes with nonprofit leadership. I think we tend to be very entrepreneurial. So sometimes when we collaborate, we feel like we're losing that. We feel like we're not able to make it our own, and we're not able to
mhm,
put our fingerprint on, the work we're doing. But, the best of us are selfless. And so we want the good to happen, even if we're not the name or the face behind it. So collaboration is a big piece of that. My one caution with always just pushing collaboration is we live in a capitalist society, and I'm very much a capitalist. And if you know a way to do something better, if you know a way to do it more efficiently, to do it in a way that it reaches more or serves more, and you are not making headway by trying to collaborate, you go ahead and get that 501(c)(3
mm.
because you should be doing what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, try to work with your peers and partners first.
Yeah, I really love that advice because I think we see it a lot in the sports space. And our podcast, we talk to a lot of athletes and people that use sport as a tool for good. And there are so many athletes out there kind of saying, well, how can I help? Like, do I create my own nonprofit? Do I partner with existing folks? And I think that piece of advice you just gave, which is like, is there something you can do better than anyone else and collaboration isn't working, then go do it. If not,
Yeah.
like see where collaboration can plug in. Like what a great thing for people to be thinking about as they have these tough discussions, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I just wanted to see, I know you work with a variety of causes. You work with a variety of folks that are entrepreneurial startups all the way to, trying to build and grow on this $1 million budget. I'm sure they're kind of ranges of sizes of organizations, but I wanted to know if you've had any work or worked with anyone that has this sports tie into their work. And if there's anything in the sports space that you can pick out or things that you've done kind of with Do More Good and some of the content. Is there anything that sticks out from your end around successful sports partnerships in terms of philanthropy or nonprofits?
So, one of, there's a lot of common themes we see with the nonprofits we work with. And I think the strongest sports tie in is the use of competitive games like golf and marathons and relays and all of that to further a cause.
Hmm.
And I see it becoming more and more prevalent due to COVID. So people aren't as comfortable gathering inside. The galas are kind of, they're coming back now, but for 2 years they were not happening.
Hmm.
But man, people could go golfing. They could do that safely outdoors and having races and whatnot. And now, with such an increase in the way we can make things accessible in sports so everybody can take part, Yeah, I see that being a really strong theme, and I think it's only gonna grow.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving that perspective because we typically talk to people that are working with young people, right? And saying, this is a soccer program where we're teaching them about health and wellness, or we're teaching them about, community building or getting folks in the community to come out and play with them. But I think there is this broader tie in of accessibility with sport that everybody knows what a 5K is, right? Everybody's comfortable with a golf tournament. Like it's something that everybody can kind of think about and say, that sounds like fun. I want to participate. And I think that's a really great tie-in for philanthropic fundraising is that there's something that is for all ages, right? It could be fun. You could do a 5K walk run, you could do a marathon, golf tournament, whatever it is. I've seen kickball games and baseball games and all kinds of stuff. And I think sports is such a great tie-in of that universal language that everybody can kind of get behind and rally behind for a cause. You see all the walks for good, or the walks for, there's a race coming up for NAMI and they're doing all of their regional walks. So it's certainly a
Yeah.
huge tie-in on that end for sure.
And donors are passionate people. Obviously, they're supporting with their wealth, with their generosity. It's okay to have them get a little bit competitive for your cause. I mean, you may actually pull more out of them in terms of commitment and passion when you give them a platform through which to do it.
Yeah, I love that. So using sport as that kind of competitive edge to let your donors compete and show who, and not, they're both caring, they both are passionate, but let's see who can edge out who. And in the benefit is this organization raising even more money for this amazing cause. So I love using sport as that tool in that way to gear up even more funding for an awesome organization. Yeah, that's great. Um, so you've served, you mentioned earlier, 50,000 plus nonprofits in some of the programs that you've done. And I'm sure you've heard tons of stories about some of the great work that these organizations have done. Is there anything that sticks out to you in terms of how do you evaluate the impact that you guys make? Is it those nonprofits coming back and saying, thanks to this program, we were able to do X, Y, and Z? Are there stories that stick with you today of the impact you've made? And is there any that you'd be able to share with us around how you measure that success?
Absolutely. I will tell you that's one of it's one of the things we struggle with a little bit because we're a large organization and we don't do any direct service. So we're strictly education. People consume our webinars, our content online, but they very rarely directly link it to their success. But once in a while, they do give us a call. They do, reach out and say, hey, something amazing has happened and we want you to know about it. And recently I had one, Junior Achievement of West Michigan. So, Junior Achievement is an organization that kind of gets kids thinking about career paths and how the economy works. Beautiful program. They use volunteers from a local community to come in and talk to kids in the schools. And this organization actually they needed a new building, and rather than do a capital campaign to start from the ground up, they networked in their community and found an architectural firm that was looking to leave their building. And this thing is massive, massive, gorgeous building. And they donated it to Junior Achievement.
Oh,
And the
wow.
beautiful thing is, they were able to build a little city inside of it where kids could run a Jimmy John's store, um, Chick fil A, barber shop, all of the different businesses that make a community go. And they can walk into this building and experience it. And I was just blown away. It really spoke to the creativity of the nonprofit sector, but also the power of public and private partnership.
Yeah, and what a fantastic way to hear about the impact is. I mean, this is such a big thing that, been thinking, had they not been thinking this kind of way, right? To say like, oh, maybe there's someone we could reach out to, or maybe there's a way we could
Yeah.
leverage these opportunities. It's little things. So it's probably tough to not be able to kind of directly say like this person watched this video or attended this workshop and now X, right? But at the same time, it's probably really rewarding to know that people feel more confident about going out and tackling these big challenges and getting those resources and kind of feel educated as they make those big decisions. What a amazing example.
It was a cool day. That was a very good day. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that you guys acquired or worked with Nonprofit Hub during COVID. That's kind of when you guys adopted that. So we've all made big changes over the last couple years. What adjustments have you guys made? I know you were already digital during this whole time, but have you had to change, whether it's the content, whether it's some of the delivery around the work that you do, and where do you see this continuing to grow in terms of the next steps for your work?
So, one of the beautiful things that came out of it is just the realization that we don't all have to be in the same room to do our work. And it actually pushed us. We had always recruited from the states where we had an office.
Mm,
And this actually pushed us to build a fully remote team. So now we recruit those who are the best match for the job.
yeah.
And their zip code has nothing to do with that. And I know not every nonprofit has that ability, but they do with their service providers, with their consultants. And I think one big benefit of COVID is that it got us all onto Zoom, like we were talking about, and it got us comfortable working with people who are not, able to come meet with us in a conference room.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge benefit too, if you're looking at nonprofit partnerships as well. You don't have to work with someone that you can go shake hands with and meet in your office. You could work with
No.
someone across town, across the country, around the world. That might be a great partner for what you're doing. I love that example. And I love that you guys have been able to expand your own talent pool and say, hey, we can find these really passionate, driven people regardless of where they live. And I think that's a really good point for nonprofit folks. You mentioned earlier in the conversation around leveraging contract work and leveraging
Mhm.
opportunities for people to kind of join your team as you need it. And I think a lot of nonprofits have had to get creative and get flexible in these times. And so hopefully this is a new way for them to cut down on some costs and at the same time bring in really dedicated, driven people, right? That's a great takeaway from what you guys are doing. But I see that in the partnership space too, right? There's just so many more kind of areas to explore.
Absolutely. And even with volunteers, I mean,
Hmm.
how much admin work could be done remotely, and could it be done remotely with volunteers from around the nation rather than just trying to recruit from a small area?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I have a couple more questions specifically about the work you guys do, and then we'll get to kind of our final couple questions of the interview. In terms of the workshops, the resources, the events you put on, give us an example of kind of the focus. How do you decide what content to put out there? Are you talking to nonprofit leaders to say what do you want to hear, or do you have kind of core focus areas that you stick to in terms of the things you put out?
So we try to be as responsive to the sector's needs as possible. And um, we use a lot of SEO, so we pay close attention to what people are searching for as it relates to cause work.
Mm,
Um, but a more tangible, a more imaginable way to look at that is we do webinars every week, and we keep track of how many people are interested in each topic. For example, we did one on corporate partnerships last month that over 700 people registered. So we now know that that's a hot topic, and we're
mhm.
going to work to develop content around that. Um, we try to check the boxes of the things that we know people pursuing this work should be looking at. So we always have content on, like, getting your 990 done, or on good budgeting practices. But other than, those core topics, we try to be very responsive to what nonprofit professionals need.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great. I love the idea of bringing people in for a workshop or for an event and seeing what the interest is and saying, "Oh, okay, this is a really good way to look at it." And SEO is a great thing too. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for nonprofits to leverage some of that information as well. There's so much out there in the digital space that, usually is not too overwhelming cost wise to get some information around what are people looking at around this? How can you boost your own ranking in these spaces, writing a blog, something like that, where it's not super labor or cost intensive. So I'm glad to hear you guys use that because it's a great tool.
There's two things that every nonprofit should have. One is the Google Ad Grant. So
Hmm.
$10,000 a month free advertising for your nonprofit. But with that, get a tool like Uber Suggest or SEMrush that will inform what you put in those ads. And those tools, I mean, I think max are like $300. So it's money well spent, and it will give you an edge in terms of being found and staying top of mind with your audience.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And I think again, it's about staying adaptive and understanding what people are doing, how they're searching. And I love that you guys are kind of leading by example, saying, here's what we do with our work, and here's how we learn what you guys want to know. You can do the same thing with your stakeholders, with your donors. You can find how that you can learn how they're finding you, find more people, and also create things that people are looking for in terms of beneficiaries or folks that need your services, if that's your work.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in a local community, usually you won't have as much digital competition as you would on a national level. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, amazing. I know I've heard good things about the Google Ad Grant from a lot of nonprofits that have done it. So definitely a great tip for everyone here to go look that up and make sure you fill that out because it is an amazing resource that is there for you. So that's fantastic. Katie, if listeners should take anything away from the work that you do at Do More Good and Nonprofit Hub, what's the one thing you'd want them to take away and share with a friend after they listen to this episode?
I guess don't be discouraged. Wherever you're at, there is a way to do more good. That's what we're all about. So if you're frustrated getting started, there are resources, there are tools, and if nothing else, there's similar stories that will encourage you to keep going. If you are just, doing amazing and growing full kilter, then focus on what you can do to keep that momentum and to do it right. I'm a big believer in professional development, and I think that is one thing that will keep the nonprofit sector strong and thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Don't be discouraged. Find the resources you need and keep it going. I love that. And we're here. We're called the Big League Philanthropist. We're talking about nonprofit and philanthropy. So, Katie, in your mind, what does the word philanthropist mean to you? What does being a philanthropist mean, and how would you describe it?
So, we all have moments where we have something that somebody else needs and we have the ability to give it. That could be time, that could be a smile, that could be encouragement. And we can't always give it because, we can't give everything of ourselves. You can't pour from an empty dish. But a philanthropist is somebody who, whenever they can, they do. Whenever it makes sense, they do. So they don't let greed, they don't let selfishness, they don't let self-interest get in the way of furthering another's good. I think that is the definition of philanthropy.
I love that. That is fantastic. And of course, we can't end this interview without giving you a chance to let us know how can people find you if there's nonprofit, supporters, ambassadors, entrepreneurs, founders that are here listening, where can they find you? What's the best way for them to go discover some of the resources you all have? And what is coming up next? If there's anything you want us to kind of plug with our listeners here that you've got coming up.
Sure, sure. So, nonprofithub.org is the website that has all of the free resources I mentioned. So, definitely check that out. As far as the next big thing we have coming up, Cause Camp, the National Nonprofit Conference, is happening in May, and you can check that out at cause.camp. We got very cute with the URL. You can literally have a .camp URL. So,
Oh, that's cool.
that's a great way to connect with peers, network, and it's both virtual and in person.
Fantastic. Well, Katie, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us about Do More Good and Nonprofit Hub. It's fantastic. I think we have a lot of folks coming in from the sports background, really talking about the work that they do in the community. So it's fantastic to have someone from the nonprofit sector really giving us the scoop on what people are worried about, what people are focused on, and also just those differences between corporate and nonprofit and just some of the challenges you see and the opportunities really that you see in the space. So is there any last word, parting, advice, wisdom for anyone listening around their efforts in the nonprofit world?
I guess just think of what's one thing you could do to do more good and then do that thing.
Awesome. I love it. What a perfect tie-in and way to end this episode. So Katie, thanks again for all your time. We really appreciate you being here. And we will be excited to get people to your site to enjoy all of the good resources that you have.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yes. Thanks again. And thanks to everybody for tuning in.